The fluorescent lights above my desk hummed their monotonous song, a constant companion during these endless nights at Vincenzo Corp. My fingers ached from typing, the joints stiff and swollen after 12 hours of processing invoices, scheduling meetings, and answering calls that always seemed to come at the worst possible moment. The office building stood silent now, emptied of its usual chaos, leaving only the occasional groan of the heating system and the distant wail of sirens cutting through Manhattan's restless darkness. I rubbed my eyes, smudging the cheap mascara I'd applied that morning. A lifetime ago, it felt like. The clock on my computer screen blinked 11:47 p.m. in aggressive red numbers, mocking my exhaustion. My stomach growled, reminding me that the stale granola bar I'd eaten at lunch was hardly sufficient fuel for a human being. But rent didn't pay itself, and Mrs. Chen at the corner bodega had already extended my tab twice this month. The elevator chimed somewhere down the hall, its mechanical voice announcing an arrival I hadn't expected. My breath caught. Nobody came to the executive floor this late. Nobody except him. Dante Caruso. Even his name felt dangerous on my tongue, though I'd never dared speak it aloud in his presence. Mr. Caruso, I called him, always with the proper distance, the appropriate deference. I'd been his administrative assistant for 6 months. 6 months of walking on eggshells, of perfecting the art of invisibility. He barely looked at me during our interactions, his steel-gray eyes always focused on documents, his phone, the skyline beyond his office windows, anywhere but at the mousy girl who organized his calendar and fetched his coffee. I heard them before I saw them, the distinctive click of expensive leather shoes against marble, accompanied by the heavier footfalls of his security detail. They always traveled in threes, Dante in the center, flanked by men whose suits couldn't quite hide the weapons beneath. I'd learned not to stare, not to ask questions, not to wonder too loudly about the nature of Vincenzo Corp's import-export business. The footsteps stopped at his office door, 30 feet from my desk. I kept my eyes trained on my computer screen, trying to appear engrossed in the spreadsheet that had long since blurred into incomprehensible columns. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that seemed to echo in the silent office. Miss Bennett. His voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Smooth, controlled, with an accent that spoke of old money and older secrets. I'd heard him speak Italian on the phone sometimes, the words flowing like dark honey. Beautiful and untouchable. I looked up, forcing my expression into professional neutrality. Mr. Caruso, I wasn't expecting you back tonight. He stood framed in the low light from the corridor, a figure carved from shadows and expensive tailoring. His suit was charcoal gray, fitted perfectly to his broad shoulders and lean frame. Even at this late hour, not a single dark hair fell out of place. He couldn't have been older than 32, 33 at most, but his eyes held centuries of knowing, of seeing things that people like me couldn't imagine. Why are you still here? It wasn't concern in his voice, just curiosity. Clinical, detached. The quarterly reports needed finishing. You have the board meeting tomorrow at 9. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I wanted everything ready. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. One of his guards, Marco, I think his name was, whispered something in rapid Italian. Dante's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Go home, Miss Bennett. The reports can wait. It wasn't a suggestion. I knew better than to argue with Dante Caruso when he used that particular tone, the one that suggested consequences for disobedience. I nodded, fingers already reaching for the mouse to save my work. Right away, Mr. Caruso. He disappeared into his office without another word, Marco and the other guard taking positions outside his door like stone sentinels. I exhaled slowly, gathering my worn purse and the thin jacket that did little against November's bite. My hands trembled slightly as I logged out of the system, adrenaline still coursing through my veins from the brief interaction. The elevator ride down felt eternal, my reflection in the polished brass doors showing a girl who looked older than her 26 years. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my brown hair hung limp around my shoulders, desperately in need of a trim I couldn't afford. I looked away, unable to face the evidence of my exhaustion. The lobby security guard, old Mr. Peters, gave me a sympathetic nod as I signed out. Late night again, Miss Bennett? Always is, Mr. Peters. I managed a smile that felt like a grimace. The November air hit me like a physical force, sharp and merciless, cutting through my jacket as if it were made of tissue paper. I pulled it tighter, knowing it was futile, and started the 3-block walk to the subway station. The streets weren't entirely empty. This was New York, after all. But the late hour had thinned the crowds to scattered individuals, each wrapped in their own private worlds. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I fished it out with numb fingers, expecting another overdue bill notification, or perhaps a concerned text from my roommate Sophie, wondering when I'd finally come home. Instead, I saw a name that made my heart skip. Jake Morrison. Still on for coffee tomorrow? Been looking forward to it. A genuine smile crossed my lips, the first real one in days. Jake. Sweet, normal Jake from my Tuesday evening pottery class. The one normal thing I'd allowed myself in months. He had kind eyes and an easy laugh, worked as a teacher at an elementary school in Brooklyn, and didn't know anything about the dark world I orbited during my working hours. I typed back quickly. Wouldn't miss it. 10 a.m. at the grind? His response came immediately. Perfect. Can't wait to see you, Ellie. The warmth in my chest spread, a small flame against the night's cold. Maybe I deserved something good. Maybe I deserved someone who looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just a piece of office furniture that occasionally needed feeding. The subway station swallowed me into its fluorescent depths, the usual symphony of screeching trains and echoing voices, a strange comfort. I found a seat on the half-empty car, my body sagging against the plastic as exhaustion finally claimed its due. The rhythm of the train lulled me into a daze, my mind wandering to tomorrow's coffee date, to Jake's gentle hands helping me shape clay last week, to the possibility of something normal, something mine. I didn't notice the black SUV that had followed me from the office building. Didn't see the way it idled near the subway entrance, engine running, tinted windows revealing nothing. Didn't sense the eyes that watched my descent into the underground, cataloging, memorizing, reporting back to someone who'd suddenly developed an interest in his assistant's private life. The train pulled away from the station, carrying me toward my cramped apartment in Queens, toward tomorrow's promise of coffee and normalcy. I clutched my phone, rereading Jake's message, that small flame of hope burning brighter with each word. I should have known better. Hope was a luxury people like me couldn't afford. Not when we worked in the shadows of men like Dante Caruso, but I was young and tired and so desperately lonely that I'd convinced myself I could have both worlds. The dangerous job that paid my bills, and the safe romance that might heal my heart. The universe, I would learn, didn't allow such convenient divisions. By the time I emerged from the subway in my neighborhood, the clock had crossed into a new day. I trudged up the 4 flights to the apartment I shared with Sophie, each step an effort of will. She'd left the living room light on for me, a small kindness that made my eyes sting. I collapsed onto my bed without bothering to change, Jake's message still glowing on my phone screen. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I'd have coffee with a nice man who didn't carry the weight of violence in his eyes. Tomorrow, I'd remember what it felt like to be normal. But first, I had to survive the night. And in the morning, I'd have to face Dante Caruso again. Pretend I didn't feel the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Pretend I didn't notice the way his guards sometimes watched me when they thought I wasn't looking. I fell asleep with my clothes still on, phone clutched in my hand, dreaming of pottery studios and gentle hands and a life that didn't involve fluorescent lights and expensive men who smelled like danger and old money. I didn't dream about the storm that was coming. Didn't dream about the moment everything would change. Didn't dream about the look that would cross Dante Caruso's face when he saw me standing in the coffee shop. My hand wrapped around another man's. My smile real and unguarded in a way it never was at the office. I didn't dream about the way his world and mine would collide. Inevitable as gravity, destructive as fire, but I should have. Because men like Dante Caruso don't just let things go. And I, Eleanor Bennett, invisible administrative assistant, had just become visible in the most dangerous way possible. The morning arrived too quickly, dragging me from restless sleep with all the subtlety of a freight train. Sophie was already gone, her bedroom door open to reveal the organized chaos she called home. A note on the kitchen counter, scrawled in her distinctive looping handwriting, made me smile despite my grogginess. You better tell me everything about Coffee Boy. Don't think I forgot. S. I showered quickly. The hot water, a luxury I allowed myself for exactly 7 minutes before guilt about the utility bill kicked in. My reflection in the foggy bathroom mirror showed slight improvement from last night's exhausted ghost. The dark circles remained, but at least my eyes held a spark of anticipation. For Jake. For normalcy. For the possibility of something that belonged only to me. I chose my outfit carefully, a rare indulgence in vanity. A soft blue sweater that Sophie insisted brought out my eyes, dark jeans that actually fit, and the ankle boots I'd splurged on during a moment of reckless optimism 6 months ago. My hair cooperated for once, falling in decent waves past my shoulders, a touch of mascara, a swipe of lip gloss, and I almost looked like someone who had her life together. The lie was perfect. The grind sat on a corner in the West Village, one of those aggressively trendy coffee shops with exposed brick, mismatched furniture, and prices that made my wallet weep. But Jake had suggested it, and I wasn't about to propose the greasy diner near my apartment, where coffee came in chipped mugs and tasted like regret. I arrived 10 minutes early, my nervous habit of never being late manifesting in full force. The shop hummed with Saturday morning energy. Couples sharing pastries, students hunched over laptops, the hiss and gurgle of the espresso machine providing a caffeinated soundtrack. I claimed a small table near the window, positioning myself so I could watch the street, waiting for Jake's familiar figure. My phone buzzed. A work email. On Saturday. Of course. Miss Bennett. I'll need the Henderson contract files Monday morning. First thing, DC. No pleasantries. No acknowledgement that it was the weekend. Just the expectation of availability. Of compliance. I typed back a quick confirmation, shoving down the irritation that flared hot in my chest. This was my time. My morning. And Dante Caruso didn't get to invade it with, "Ellie." Jake's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts, warm and genuine. He waved from the entrance, his smile broad and uncomplicated, and something in my chest loosened. He wore a navy Henley and jeans, his sandy hair slightly messy, looking exactly like what he was, a good man, an ordinary man, someone who belonged in daylight. I stood, returning his smile, and he crossed the space between us in quick strides. Before I could overthink it, he pulled me into a brief hug, the scent of clean laundry and mint enveloping me. Safe. He smelled safe. "You look amazing," he said, pulling back to meet my eyes. His were hazel, flecked with gold, and they looked at me like I was someone worth seeing. "You're not so bad yourself." The words came easier than I expected. Natural, like maybe I remembered how to do this after all. We ordered. An overpriced latte for me, black coffee for him, and a chocolate croissant we agreed to split. As we waited at the counter, Jake's hand found mine, his fingers lacing through my own with comfortable ease. It was such a simple gesture, innocent and sweet, the kind of thing couples did without thinking. But my heart hammered anyway, hyper-aware of the touch, of the publicness of it, of the strange vulnerability of being seen with someone, of being claimed, however gently. "I'm really glad you agreed to this," Jake said, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. "I wasn't sure if you were just being polite at class." "I'm not really the polite type," I lied, thinking of every interaction at Vincenzo Corp, every carefully measured word, every swallowed opinion. He laughed, the sound easy and light. "Good. I like honest better than polite." We collected our order and returned to our table, hands still linked, and I felt something in me unfurl like a flower that had forgotten about sunlight. Maybe this could work. Maybe I could have this. Coffee dates and hand-holding and someone who didn't make me feel like I was constantly walking through a minefield. "So tell me something real," Jake said, settling into his chair, his eyes never leaving my face. "Not small talk. Something true about Ellie Bennett." I hesitated, sipping my latte to buy time. What was true? That I worked for a man who terrified me? That I went to bed hungry more often than I'd admit? That sometimes I felt so invisible I wondered if I'd simply cease to exist? "I'm tired," I said finally, the truth slipping out unbidden. "I'm 26 and I feel ancient. And I'm terrified I'll wake up at 40 and realize I spent my whole life just surviving." Jake's expression softened, his grip on my hand tightening. "Then let's not just survive. Let's actually live a little." He grinned, that easy charm lighting his features. starting with this absurdly expensive croissant. I laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and genuine, and reached for the pastry. The moment felt crystallized, perfect in its simplicity, sunlight streaming through the window, the warmth of Jake's hand in mine, the taste of chocolate and butter on my tongue. Then the door chimed, and my entire world tilted on its axis. I saw him before he saw me, Dante Caruso, stepping into the grind like he owned it, which, for all I knew, he did. He wore all black today, tailored pants, a fitted sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent, a leather jacket that screamed wealth and danger in equal measure. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run his fingers through it recently, and even from across the room, I could see the sharp intelligence in those steel-gray eyes. Marco flanked him on the left, another guard I didn't recognize on the right. They moved with predatory grace, scanning the room with professional efficiency, marking exits, cataloging threats. My hand spasmed in Jake's grip. "You okay?" he asked, concern creasing his forehead. "Fine," I managed, my voice strangled. Work thing." But it was too late. Dante's gaze swept the coffee shop in that methodical way of his, and then it landed on me. And stopped. I watched his face, that carefully controlled mask, fracture for just a moment. His eyes dropped to where Jake's hand held mine, to the intimate way we sat leaned toward each other, to the evidence of something happening that existed completely outside his awareness, his control. Something dark flashed across his features, surprise, confusion, and something else I couldn't identify but felt in my bones like a warning. He didn't move, didn't approach. Just stood there, frozen, his entire body going still in a way that reminded me of a predator deciding whether to pounce or retreat. Marco leaned in, murmuring something, but Dante's hand came up in a sharp gesture that silenced him immediately. His eyes never left mine, the intensity of his stare pinning me to my seat like a butterfly to a board. "Ellie?" Jake's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Do you know that guy? He's staring at you." "My boss," I whispered, my throat tight. "That's my boss." Jake followed my gaze, his expression shifting to something protective. His hand tightened on mine, a gesture of support that Dante absolutely registered, his jaw clenching almost imperceptibly. "Want me to tell him to back off?" Jake asked, his voice low but determined. "You're not at work. He has no business." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. "No, please, just let me handle it." But I didn't know how to handle this. Didn't know what to do with the weight of Dante's attention, with the way he looked at me like he'd never actually seen me before and was trying to reconcile this version. Laughing, relaxed, someone's romantic interest, with the quiet ghost who haunted his office. The moment stretched, taut as a wire, ready to snap. Then Dante moved. Not toward us, but toward the counter, his guards adjusting their positions to accommodate. He ordered something, his voice too low for me to hear, but his eyes kept flickering back to our table, to my hand still entwined with Jake's, to the evidence of my separate life. "Is he always this intense?" Jake asked, attempting levity but missing the mark. "Because that's some serious boss energy." "You have no idea," I muttered, unable to look away from Dante even though every instinct screamed at me to pretend he didn't exist. He collected his coffee, black probably, he struck me as the type, and turned toward the exit. For one blessed moment, I thought he'd leave without acknowledging me further, without making this worse than it already was. But Dante Caruso wasn't that merciful. He altered his trajectory, heading directly for our table, Marco and the other guard maintaining their protective formation. Jake straightened in his seat, his posture shifting subtly into something more alert, more defensive. "Miss Bennett." Dante's voice held that same controlled quality, but underneath it ran currents I couldn't interpret. "I didn't expect to see you here. It's Saturday, Mr. Caruso." I forced professionalism into my tone, even as my pulse hammered wildly. "My day off." "Of course." His gaze slid to Jake, assessing him with the same clinical precision he'd used to evaluate a business proposal. "I'm interrupting." It wasn't a question. and the unspoken threat beneath those words made my stomach drop. This was my world colliding with his, and I had no idea how to navigate it, how to protect Jake from the dangerous attention he'd just attracted. Jake, bless him, extended his free hand, the one not holding mine. Jake Morrison. I'm a friend, I interjected quickly, desperately. Jake's a friend from my pottery class. The look Dante gave our still joined hands suggested he found my categorization inadequate. A friend. The way he repeated it, flat and cold, made the word sound like an accusation. Yes. Jake's voice held an edge now, responding to the implicit challenge. Is that a problem? Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Marco shifted slightly, his hand moving to his jacket in a gesture that Jake, civilian that he was, probably didn't recognize, but I absolutely did. My heart climbed into my throat. No problem at all. Dante's smile didn't reach his eyes. Enjoy your coffee, Miss Bennett. I'll see you Monday morning, 8 o'clock sharp. We have much to discuss. He left without waiting for a response, his guards falling into step with mechanical precision. Through the window, I watched them climb into a black SUV with tinted windows, the vehicle pulling into traffic with the smooth confidence of people who expected the world to move out of their way. Well, Jake said after a long moment. That was weird. I couldn't answer, couldn't find words adequate to explain the dread pooling in my stomach, the certainty that something fundamental had just shifted. Dante had seen me, really seen me, and men like him didn't just forget things, didn't just let interesting developments slide. He seems like a piece of work, Jake continued, trying to lighten the mood. But hey, at least you stood your ground. That took guts. If only he knew. If only I could explain that standing my ground with Dante Caruso was like trying to hold back a tsunami with my bare hands. Futile and ultimately destructive. My phone buzzed against the table, a text from an unknown number. Monday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. We need to have a conversation about workplace boundaries and appropriate friendships. My blood ran cold. The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety that no amount of Jake's reassuring texts could fully dispel. Saturday afternoon, he'd walked me to the subway, kissed my cheek with a sweetness that made my chest ache, and promised to text me later. He kept that promise. Messages filled with jokes, questions about my day, plans for our next date, normal things. Beautiful, ordinary things that felt increasingly like lifelines thrown to a drowning woman. But beneath every moment of lightness lurked the memory of Dante's face in that coffee shop. The way his expression had shifted from blank professionalism to something far more complicated when he'd seen my hand in Jake's. The text message burned in my mind. Those words about appropriate friendships dripping with implications I didn't want to examine too closely. Sunday night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw steel-gray irises fixed on me with an intensity that felt like being dissected, studied, catalogued. At 3 a.m., I gave up and made tea, sitting at our tiny kitchen table while Sophie snored peacefully in the next room, blissfully unaware that her roommate was potentially about to get fired, or worse, for the crime of having coffee with a man. Monday morning arrived with cruel inevitability. I dressed with trembling hands, choosing my most conservative outfit. Black slacks, a gray blouse, flats instead of the boots, armor, however inadequate. My reflection showed a pale, hollow-eyed woman who looked like she was preparing for battle. Maybe I was. The Vincenzo Court building loomed against the early morning sky, all glass and steel and cold ambition. I signed in with Mr. Peters, whose cheerful greeting felt like mockery, and took the elevator to the executive floor. Each ascending number made my heart beat faster, a countdown to some unknown consequence. The floor was already buzzing with activity despite the early hour. Junior executives hurried past with files and laptops. Administrative staff fielded phone calls. The coffee machine in the break room gurgled its familiar song. Everything appeared normal, ordinary, unchanged. But I knew better. My desk sat in its usual position outside Dante's office, the space I'd occupied for 6 months without incident. I set down my purse, powered on my computer, tried to breathe normally. The clock read 7:47 a.m., 13 minutes until whatever awaited me. Dante's office door stood closed. No light visible beneath it. Maybe he wasn't here yet. Maybe I'd have time to prepare, to rehearse explanations, to build defenses against questions I couldn't predict. Miss Bennet. I jumped, nearly knocking over my empty coffee mug. Dante stood behind me, having approached with that unnerving silence he seemed to cultivate. He wore a charcoal suit today, perfectly tailored, his dark hair styled with careless precision. But it was his eyes that trapped me, those gray depths holding something I'd never seen directed at me before. Focus. Complete, undivided, unnerving focus. Mr. Caruso. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Good morning. My office. Now. He didn't wait for acknowledgement, simply turned and entered his domain, leaving the door open in clear expectation. I stood frozen for 3 heartbeats, then forced my legs to move, to carry me across the threshold into his territory. The office was exactly as I remembered from the few times I'd been summoned inside. Massive windows overlooking Manhattan, minimalist furniture in blacks and grays, artwork that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. Everything carefully curated to project power, control, dominance. Dante moved behind his desk but didn't sit. Instead, he stood silhouetted against the city skyline, backlit by morning sun that turned him into something almost otherworldly. Dangerous and beautiful in equal measure. Close the door. I obeyed, the soft click of the latch sealing us into privacy that suddenly felt suffocating. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk, and I perched on its edge, hands clasped in my lap to hide their trembling. Silence stretched between us, thick and expectant. Dante studied me with that same intensity from the coffee shop, his expression unreadable. I tried not to fidget, tried to meet his gaze with something resembling composure. Finally he spoke. How long? The question was so unexpected, so cryptic, that I blinked in confusion. I'm sorry? How long have you been seeing him? Dante's voice remained controlled, but something sharp edged each word. This Jake Morrison. Heat flooded my cheeks, embarrassment mixed with indignation. With all due respect, Mr. Caruso, that's not appropriate. Answer the question, Eleanor. My full name on his lips stopped me cold. He'd never used it before, always kept me at formal distance with his Miss Bennets and clipped instructions. Hearing it now, shaped by his accent and that commanding tone, felt intimate in a way that made my skin prickle. 2 weeks, I said quietly. A small rebellion of truth. We met at a pottery class. It's nothing serious. Nothing serious. He repeated my words like he was testing them, finding them wanting. Yet you hold his hand in public. Smile at him like he matters. He's a kind person. He treats me well. The defensive edge in my voice emerged unbidden. I don't see how this concerns my job performance. Dante moved then, circling his desk with predatory grace. He stopped 3 feet from my chair, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and dark, cedar and smoke. Everything about you concerns me, Eleanor. His use of my first name again sent electricity down my spine. You work in my office. You have access to sensitive information. Your relationships, your associations, they're security concerns. Jake's an elementary school teacher, I protested, standing because sitting while he loomed felt too vulnerable. Bad idea. Standing only brought me closer, put us nearly chest to chest in the limited space. He has nothing to do with your business. Yet you told him where you work, what you do. Dante's gaze bored into mine, relentless. What else have you shared? The implication hit me like a slap. I would never... Mr. Caruso, I've never discussed anything about Vincenzo Corp. Not with Jake, not with anyone. I understand confidentiality. Do you? He stepped closer, eliminating another foot of space, and suddenly I could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, could count the silver flecks in those gray eyes. Because from where I stand, you've been living a secret life. Pottery classes, coffee dates, a whole existence I knew nothing about. You're not supposed to know about it, I shot back, finding courage in desperation. My personal life is mine, Mr. Caruso. You don't own every hour of my day. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, that I'd pushed back. His jaw tightened, a muscle ticking near his temple. "Careful, Eleanor." "Or what?" The words escaped before wisdom could stop them. "You'll fire me for having coffee on my day off? For holding hands with someone? That's not just inappropriate, it's—" His hand came up, not threatening, but silencing. Fingers pinched the bridge of his nose in a gesture of frustration I'd never witnessed. "You don't understand. Then explain it to me." I held my ground despite every instinct screaming to retreat. "Make me understand why my boss is interrogating me about my personal relationships." Dante's hand dropped, and when he looked at me again, something in his gaze made my breath catch. Not anger. Something more complicated, more dangerous. "Because I saw you Saturday morning, and I didn't recognize the woman sitting in that coffee shop." The confession hung between us, raw and inexplicable. "I've worked for you for 6 months," I said slowly, trying to process. "You barely looked at me before Saturday. I was just furniture. Background noise." "I know." His voice dropped lower, almost intimate. "And now I can't stop seeing you." My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a warning. This was wrong, dangerous, a line being crossed that should remain firm and unchallenged. But part of me, some traitorous part, thrilled at being seen by him, at mattering enough to warrant this attention. "Mr. Caruso, Dante." He cut me off. "When we're alone, you can use my name." The offer felt weighted with significance I couldn't fully grasp. "That's not—" "We shouldn't." "Probably not." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, there and gone. "But here we are anyway." A knock at the door shattered the moment. Marco's voice came through the wood, respectful but insistent. "Boss, you have the Henderson meeting in 5. Dante's eyes never left mine as he called back. "Cancel it." "But—" "Cancel it." The command held absolute authority, brooking no argument. Silence from the other side of the door, then retreating footsteps. Dante took another step closer, close enough now that I had to tilt my head back at an almost painful angle. His hand rose, and I froze, certain he was about to touch me, to cross that final line. Instead, his fingers hovered near my face, not quite making contact, trembling slightly with restraint. "I need you to understand something, Eleanor. Men like your Jake Morrison, they live in daylight. Safe, predictable, normal." His voice turned rough, edged with something that might have been regret. "I exist in shadows. Everything I touch gets complicated, dangerous, corrupted." "Then why are you doing this?" My whisper barely disturbed the air between us. "Why pull me into those shadows?" His hand dropped, and he stepped back, putting necessary distance between us. When he spoke again, his voice had regained some of its professional detachment, though his eyes remained intense. "Because for 6 months, you've been the one uncomplicated thing in my world. Efficient, quiet, invisible, safe." He laughed, the sound bitter. "And then I saw you Saturday, saw you with him, and realized you'd never been invisible. I'd just been blind." My mind reeled, trying to reconcile his words with everything I'd believed about our relationship, about my role in his life. "What do you want from me?" "That's the problem." Dante returned to his desk, putting furniture between us like a barrier. "I don't know yet, but I do know this. Jake Morrison is wrong for you." Indignation flared hot in my chest. "You don't get to make that decision." "He can't protect you." "From what?" I demanded, frustration bleeding into my voice. "What exactly do I need protection from?" Dante's expression hardened, the brief vulnerability vanishing behind his usual mask. "From me, Eleanor, from this world. From the attention you've now attracted by being seen with you outside these walls." The words chilled me, implications unfolding like poisonous flowers. "Are you threatening Jake?" "I'm stating facts." His tone turned clinical, detached. "I have enemies. People who look for weaknesses, leverage, pressure points. You were safe because you were invisible. That changed Saturday." "Because you made it change," I accused, sudden clarity striking. "You could have ignored me, could have pretended you didn't see us. Instead, you approached our table, made it obvious you knew me, connected us publicly." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "Smart girl. So this is my fault?" Anger thrummed through my veins, hot and clarifying. I'm being punished for having a life outside these walls? You're being protected, Dante corrected, his voice hardening. Whether you understand that yet or not. I don't want your protection. I want my life back. The one where my boss didn't know or care who I spent my weekends with. Too late. He said it with finality, like closing a door. You can't unsee things, Eleanor. Neither can I. The phone on his desk buzzed, Marco's voice crackling through the intercom. Boss, the board is getting impatient. I've stalled twice. Dante's jaw clenched, irritation flashing across his features. He pressed the intercom button. Give me 10 minutes. Then he focused back on me, and the weight of his attention felt physical. You'll continue your job as normal. Same hours, same responsibilities. But outside this office, you'll be more careful. Pay attention to your surroundings. Notice who's watching. This is insane, I breathed. But fear was creeping in now, cold and insidious. This is reality. He moved toward the door, effectively dismissing me. And Eleanor? Until further notice, pottery class is suspended. No more dates with Morrison. The command hit me like a physical blow. You can't. That's not. He opened the door, his expression brooking no argument. I just did. This conversation is over. I stood there, rooted to the spot, fury and fear warring inside me. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to refuse, to claim my autonomy. But the steel in his voice, the absolute authority in his stance, reminded me who held the power here, not me. Never me. I walked toward the door on shaking legs, passing close enough to feel the heat of him, to catch that cedar smoke scent. At the threshold, I paused, gathering scraps of courage. This isn't protection, I said quietly, not looking back. It's control. Sometimes, Dante replied, his voice dark as midnight. They're the same thing. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog of resentment and confusion. I went through the motions at work, filing reports, answering calls, organizing Dante's schedule with mechanical precision. But everything had changed, tilted sideways into something I didn't recognize. He watched me now, constantly. Not overtly, not in ways I could call out or protest. But I felt the weight of his attention like a physical presence, tracking my movements, noting my habits. When I arrived each morning, his office door would open within minutes, as if he'd been waiting. When I left for lunch, Marco or one of the other guards would materialize nearby, shadowing me to whatever cheap deli I'd chosen. When I stayed late, which was often, because going home meant facing Sophie's questions I couldn't answer, Dante would emerge from meetings or phone calls, dismissing his staff and insisting on having his driver take me home. I refused the first 3 times. By the 4th, his expression had turned so cold, so dangerous, that I'd climbed into the back of that black SUV without another word of protest. Jake texted constantly those first few days, confused by my sudden unavailability. Everything okay? You seem distant. Just work stress, I'd replied, the lie bitter on my tongue. My boss is being demanding. Want to talk about it over dinner? I make a mean pasta. Can't. Big project deadline. Rain check? The excuses piled up, each one carving away at something tender inside me. By day 10, his messages had slowed to a trickle. By day 12, they'd stopped altogether except for a single text that made my eyes burn. I really like you, Ellie, but I get the feeling you're pulling away. If I did something wrong, just tell me. I can handle honesty better than silence. I'd stared at that message for 20 minutes, tears blurring the words before typing back. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry. No explanation. No promises of future dates, just an apology that felt like goodbye. That night, I'd cried into my pillow while Sophie slept, mourning the loss of something that had barely begun, something normal and sweet that Dante Caruso had crushed simply by noticing it existed. The atmosphere in the office shifted too. Subtle changes that most wouldn't notice, but I felt acutely. Other staff members gave me wider berths, stopped inviting me to lunch, avoided eye contact. Word had spread somehow, whispers in break rooms, speculation in elevators. The boss's assistant, suddenly elevated to some undefined status that made her untouchable, dangerous by association. I hated it. Hated the isolation, the attention, the cage that tightened around me with each passing day. Friday of the second week, Dante called me into his office at 6 p.m. The floor had emptied, support staff fleeing toward their weekends with grateful haste. Only Marco remained at his post outside, a silent sentinel. "Sit," Dante commanded without preamble, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. I obeyed, too tired to fight, my body sinking into leather that probably cost more than my monthly salary. He studied me for a long moment, those gray eyes cataloging details, the shadows beneath my eyes, the weight I'd lost making my clothes hang looser, the dullness that had crept into my expression. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. "Thank you." That's exactly what every woman wants to hear. His jaw tightened. "When's the last time you ate a real meal? Not coffee and granola bars." "I eat," I said defensively, though I couldn't remember my last proper dinner. Food had become an afterthought, fuel I consumed mechanically when my body demanded it. Dante stood abruptly, rounding his desk with that predatory grace I'd learned to recognize as decision made, action imminent. "Come on." "What?" "Where?" "Dinner." He was already moving toward the door, clearly expecting compliance. "I'm not hungry." He paused, looking back at me with an expression that managed to be both exasperated and determined. "Eleanor, I've watched you survive on caffeine and stress for 2 weeks. You're eating. Now, you can't just—" But he was already through the door, Marco falling into step beside him. I sat frozen for 3 heartbeats before the absurdity of the situation penetrated my exhaustion. Scrambling up, I hurried after them, catching up as they reached the elevator. "Mr. Caruso, Dante," he corrected, pressing the button for the lobby. "I told you to use my name when we're alone." "We're not alone." I gestured to Marco, who maintained his professional blank expression. "Marco doesn't count." The elevator arrived, doors sliding open with mechanical efficiency. Dante held his hand against them, waiting. "Are you coming, or do I need to carry you?" The threat or promise in his voice suggested he'd absolutely follow through. With as much dignity as I could muster, I stepped into the elevator, Marco entering last and positioning himself near the control panel. The descent felt eternal, tension thick enough to choke on. I tried to organize my thoughts, to prepare arguments against whatever this was, but my mind felt sluggish, overwhelmed by weeks of stress and Dante's relentless presence. The lobby was nearly empty, just Mr. Peters at his station and a cleaning crew working on the far side. The black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, another guard at the wheel. This wasn't spontaneous. He'd planned this, orchestrated it. I should go home. I tried one last time as we approached the vehicle. "Sophie will worry. Text her." Dante opened the back door, his hand at the small of my back, not pushing, but guiding, the touch burning through my blouse like a brand. "Tell her you'll be late." I climbed in because resistance felt futile, because I was so tired of fighting, because some traitorous part of me wanted this attention even as I hated myself for it. Dante slid in beside me, Marco taking the front passenger seat, the division between front and back seats providing a veneer of privacy. The SUV pulled into traffic with smooth precision, heading uptown. I watched the city slide past the tinted windows, trying to ignore Dante's proximity, the way his thigh almost touched mine, the cedar smoke scent of him filling the enclosed space. "Where are we going?" My voice came out smaller than intended. "Somewhere quiet, private." He pulled out his phone, firing off rapid texts with practiced efficiency. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption." Dread pooled in my stomach. About what? About why you look like you haven't slept in a week. About the messages Jake Morrison has been sending you. My head snapped toward him, shock and violation flooding through me. His expression remained neutral, matter of fact. "Did you think I wouldn't monitor your communications? You work for me, Eleanor. Your security is my responsibility." "You're reading my texts." The words came out strangled, fury rising hot and fast. "That's illegal. That's necessary." He pocketed his phone, turning to face me fully. "You stopped responding to him 4 days ago. Why?" "Because you told me to," I spat out. anger overriding caution, because you made it clear that having a personal life wasn't acceptable. Because you've turned my existence into a prison and My voice cracked, emotion ambushing me. I just wanted something normal, something that was mine. Silence filled the space between us, heavy and charged. The SUV turned onto a quieter street, pulling up to an unmarked building with elegant architecture. Not a restaurant, at least not one I recognized. Marco exited first, scanning the area before opening Dante's door. Dante climbed out, then extended his hand back toward me, an offering and a command in one gesture. I ignored it, exiting on my own, my independence a small rebellion. He didn't comment, just led the way through a discreet entrance where a man in an expensive suit greeted him with the deference due to royalty. "Mr. Caruso, everything is prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Thomas." Dante's hand returned to my lower back, proprietary and guiding. "This way, Eleanor." We moved through a dimly lit corridor, walls adorned with artwork that probably belonged in museums. A private elevator carried us to the top floor, opening directly into what could only be described as a penthouse apartment. All floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, and understated luxury that screamed wealth. "Where are we?" I asked, taking in the space, the view of Manhattan spread out like a glittering promise. "One of my properties." Dante shrugged off his jacket, draping it over a chair with casual ease. "I use it for private meetings. Sit. Food will be here shortly." I remained standing, arms crossed defensively. "I don't understand what we're doing here. If this is about work..." "It's not about work." He moved to a bar cart, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses. "It's about you, barely holding yourself together because I've been too heavy-handed." The admission surprised me, genuine enough that my anger faltered slightly. He brought me one of the glasses, pressing it into my hand. "Drink. It'll help." I took it automatically, the crystal heavy in my palm. The liquor, whiskey probably, expensive and smooth, burned pleasantly down my throat. Warmth spread through my chest, loosening the knot of tension that had taken up permanent residence there. "Why am I here, Dante?" Using his first name felt strange on my tongue, intimate in a way that should have been wrong, but somehow wasn't. He drained his own glass in one swallow, setting it aside with deliberate care. When he looked at me again, vulnerability flickered in those gray depths, quickly masked, but visible nonetheless. "Because I need you to understand that I'm not trying to punish you. Then what are you trying to do?" I set down my glass before I could throw it. "Because from where I stand, you've systematically dismantled my life. I lost Jake because of your protection. I'm isolated at work because everyone thinks I'm either sleeping with you or informing on them. I can't breathe without one of your guards watching. So please, enlighten me. What exactly is your goal here to keep you safe?" He said it with such conviction, such absolute certainty that I almost believed him. "From what?" I demanded, frustration cracking my voice. "You keep saying that, but you won't explain. Safe from your enemies? From yourself? From what, Dante?" A knock at the door interrupted before he could answer. Marco entered with several bags bearing the logo of an expensive Italian restaurant, setting them on the dining table before retreating without a word. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the space, making my stomach growl despite my emotional turmoil. Dante gestured toward the table. "Eat first. Then we'll talk." "I want to talk now. Eleanor." My name carried warning and plea in equal measure. "Eat. Please." The please surprised me enough that I moved toward the table, settling into one of the chairs. He joined me, unpacking containers that revealed pasta, salad, bread. Enough food for 4 people, let alone 2. We ate in tense silence, the food delicious despite my inability to fully appreciate it. Dante watched me between his own bites, that assessing gaze making me hyper-aware of every movement, every swallow. Finally, when I'd consumed enough to satisfy him, he pushed aside his plate and leaned back, studying me with unnerving intensity. "3 weeks ago someone tried to kill me," he said without preamble, the words dropping like stones into still water. "Car bomb. If Marco hadn't noticed the device beforehand, I'd be dead." My breath caught, the pasta suddenly sitting heavy in my stomach. I didn't know. No one did. We kept it quiet, handled it internally. His fingers drummed against the table, a rare show of agitation. But it meant someone had gotten close enough, knew my schedule well enough to plant explosives. Someone inside my organization fed them information. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. And then you saw me with Jake, and then I saw you with someone whose background I didn't know, whose presence in your life I hadn't authorized. His voice hardened. Someone who could have been sent to get close to you, to use you against me. Jake's a teacher, I protested weakly, but doubt had crept in, poisonous and insidious. Maybe. Dante leaned forward, elbows on the table, his intensity pinning me in place. Or maybe he's exactly what he seems, and I'm being paranoid. But I can't take that risk, Eleanor, not with you. Why? The question burst out, desperate and confused. Why do you care? I'm just your assistant. I file papers and answer phones. I'm nobody. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with enough pressure to be felt but not hurt. You're not nobody. Not to me. Not anymore. The words hung between us, raw and undeniable. His grip on my wrist burned like a brand, his thumb pressed against my racing pulse. I could feel my heartbeat betraying me, hammering against his touch, proof of the effect he had despite every rational protest my mind could muster. Let me go, I whispered, but the command lacked conviction. Not until you understand. His gray eyes searched mine, desperate and determined in equal measure. I've spent 6 months barely noticing you existed, and now I can't stop seeing you everywhere. In my office, yes, but also in my thoughts when I should be focused on business. In my dreams when I should be sleeping. You've become a distraction I can't afford, and a necessity I don't know how to live without. That's not... I struggled for words, for logic that could combat the intensity pouring from him. That's obsession, Dante, not protection, not care. You're confusing control with concern. Maybe I am. He released my wrist but didn't retreat, his face inches from mine across the table. But that doesn't make the danger less real. The moment I approached your table in that coffee shop, the moment I made it clear you mattered to me, you became a target. Everyone who wants to hurt me now knows exactly how to do it. Fear crystallized in my chest, cold and sharp. So this is my fault? For existing? For daring to have a life outside your orbit? No. His voice softened, a rare gentleness creeping in. This is my fault for being selfish enough to claim you anyway. I should have let you go that morning. Should have walked past your table, ignored you, kept you in the safe anonymity you'd occupied, but I couldn't. I saw you laughing with him, saw you happy and unguarded. And something in me snapped. Possessiveness, I said bitterly. You saw something you suddenly wanted and decided to take it. That's what men like you do, isn't it? You acquire things. Pain flashed across his features, there and gone. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think anymore. Exhaustion crashed over me in waves, 2 weeks of stress and confusion finally taking their toll. I don't understand what you want from me, Dante. You say you're protecting me, but it feels like suffocation. You say I matter, but you won't let me have anything that's mine. What am I supposed to do with that? He stood abruptly, pacing to the windows, his silhouette dark against the glittering cityscape. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession. My father was killed when I was 19. Car bomb, like the one meant for me. My mother lasted another year before grief took her. I inherited an empire built on violence and loyalty, and I've spent 13 years learning that everyone has a price. Everyone can be turned. Everyone leaves. Voluntarily or otherwise. The vulnerability in his admission cracked something in my chest. I stood slowly, moving toward him without conscious decision, drawn by the rawness in his words. I don't let people close, he continued, still facing the windows. Don't allow attachments that can be exploited. It's safer that way, cleaner. But you... He turned, and the look in his eyes stole my breath. You were already close before I realized it. 6 months of quiet efficiency, of never asking questions, of existing in my space without demanding anything. And then I saw you with him, saw proof that you had an entire life I knew nothing about, and I realized how much I'd come to depend on your presence, how empty my office felt when you weren't there. How I'd started scheduling meetings just to have reasons to call you in, to hear your voice, to watch you move through my space like you belonged there. That's not healthy, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I know. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But since when has anything about my life been healthy? We stood 3 feet apart, the distance feeling simultaneously too much and too little. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Millions of people living ordinary existences, unaware of the dangerous game being played in this penthouse, the collision of worlds that should never have touched. I can't be what you need, I said finally, the truth painful, but necessary. I'm not built for this world, Dante. The violence, the secrets, the constant looking over my shoulder. I wanted normal. I wanted safe. And I wanted to give you that, he said softly. Even if it meant staying away, staying blind to what you'd become to me. But the bomb changed everything. Someone knows my vulnerabilities now, knows where to strike. And whether I wanted it or not, you became one of those vulnerabilities the second I acknowledged your existence. So what happens now? The question felt enormous, life-altering. You keep me in a cage? Control every aspect of my life until you decide the threat has passed? No. He closed the distance between us, his hand coming up to cup my face with surprising tenderness. Now you choose. I blinked, confused. Choose what? Whether you stay or go. His thumb traced my cheekbone, the touch achingly gentle. If you leave, really leave. Not just Vincenzo Corp, but the city entirely. I'll make sure you're set up somewhere safe. New identity, financial security, complete separation from my world. You can have the normal life you wanted. The safety, the freedom. Hope and horror warred in my chest. And if I stay? His expression hardened, intensified. If you stay, you're mine. Completely, utterly mine. I won't apologize for being possessive, for wanting to know where you are, who you're with. I'll give you everything. Protection, luxury, anything you could want. But in return, I need your loyalty. Your presence, your understanding that the world we live in requires certain precautions. You're asking me to be your prisoner, I breathed. I'm asking you to be my partner. He corrected, his other hand finding my waist, pulling me closer. To trust that what I feel for you, however fucked up and controlling it might seem, comes from a place of genuine care. I can't promise normal, Eleanor. I can't promise easy. But I can promise that I will burn down anyone who tries to hurt you, that you will never want for anything, that you will be cherished in ways that man with his pottery classes and sweet texts could never manage. That's not fair to Jake, I protested weakly, even as my body betrayed me, leaning into Dante's touch. Maybe not. His forehead touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. But he can't protect you from car bombs and assassins. He can't give you a life of luxury and power. He can't make you feel the way I do. I saw it in your eyes that morning, Eleanor. The fear, yes, but also the thrill, the recognition that something had fundamentally shifted. He was right. And I hated him for it. Hated that my pulse raced when he was near. That some dark part of me responded to his intensity, his obsession. Jake had been safe, comfortable, normal, everything I thought I wanted. But standing here in Dante's arms, feeling the leashed violence in him, the barely controlled desire, I couldn't deny the electric pull between us. This is insane, I whispered. Probably. His lips brushed my temple, feather light. Choose, Eleanor. Safe and normal somewhere far from me. Or dangerous and mine right here. But know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. If you want to leave, I'll let you go. I won't follow. Won't interfere with whatever life you build. The offer should have been easy. Take the escape, run from the danger, reclaim my autonomy. But 2 weeks of being seen by him, of mattering to someone who existed in such sharp relief compared to the muted tones of my previous life, had changed something fundamental in me. I need time, I said finally, pulling back to meet his eyes. This isn't a decision I can make with you touching me, with my mind spinning and my heart confused. Disappointment flickered across his features, but he nodded, releasing me with visible reluctance. How much time? The weekend. I stepped away, needing distance to think. Monday morning, I'll give you my answer. And until then? His voice held careful neutrality. Until then, everything stays as it is. I go home. You stop reading my texts. We maintain professional boundaries. I gathered my purse, my hands shaking slightly. Can Marco drive me back? I'll drive you. Dante retrieved his jacket, shrugging it on with practiced ease. One last chance to change your mind and let me plead my case. The drive back to Queens was quiet, tension humming between us like a live wire. Dante didn't touch me, didn't speak beyond necessary directions, but his presence filled the vehicle, overwhelming and inescapable. When we finally pulled up outside my building, humble and worn compared to the luxury I'd just left, he turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Eleanor. My name on his lips sent shivers down my spine. Whatever you decide, know that I meant what I said. You're not nobody. You never were. I climbed out without responding, unable to trust my voice, but at my building's entrance, I looked back. He stood beside the SUV, backlit by streetlights, watching me with that intensity that had become almost familiar. I raised my hand in a small wave. Acknowledgement, goodbye, I wasn't sure, and disappeared inside. The weekend passed in agonizing slowness. Sophie tried to draw me out, concerned by my obvious turmoil. But how could I explain? My Mafia boss is obsessed with me and wants me to choose between freedom and being his kept woman. The words sounded insane even in my head. Saturday afternoon, Jake called. I stared at his name on my screen for 5 rings before answering. Ellie. He sounded tired, resigned. I think we need to talk. I know. My voice cracked. Jake, I'm so sorry. It's okay. He cut me off gently. I talked to a friend who knows about your boss, about the kind of man he is, the kind of business he runs, and I realized I can't compete with that, can't protect you from that. I'm just a guy who likes pottery and kids, Ellie. I'm not built for whatever world you're caught up in. Tears streamed down my face, hot and unstoppable. You deserve better than this mess. So do you. His kindness gutted me, but I don't think you're going to choose better, are you? I can hear it in your voice. You're already gone. I don't know what I am, I admitted through tears. Yeah, you do. He sighed, the sound carrying acceptance and sadness. Take care of yourself, Ellie, and if you ever need an escape route, someone who remembers the normal girl you were, call me, okay? Okay. The word barely made it out. After we hung up, I cried for an hour, mourning not just Jake, but the version of myself who'd believed normal was achievable, that I could exist in Dante's orbit without being consumed by it. Sunday, I barely left my room, thinking, weighing, trying to logic my way through a decision that existed beyond logic. Safe versus seen. Normal versus needed. Freedom versus... what? Love? Obsession? Something darker and more complicated than either word could contain? Monday morning arrived with cruel clarity. I dressed carefully. The blue sweater I'd worn to coffee with Jake. Armor against whatever came next. The subway ride to Vincenzo Corp felt surreal, each stop bringing me closer to irrevocable choice. The executive floor buzzed with its usual Monday chaos, but it all felt distant, unreal. My desk waited, unchanged. My computer password the same. The coffee machine gurgling its familiar song, normal, except nothing was normal anymore. Dante's office door stood closed. I sat, hands folded, waiting. Minutes ticked past. 5, 10, 15. Finally, at 8:47 a.m., the door opened. He looked like he hadn't slept, dark circles shadowing his eyes, his hair less perfectly styled than usual, but when his gaze found mine, the intensity there stole my breath. Eleanor. Not a question, just acknowledgement. I stood, legs steadier than I expected. I made my decision. And? His voice remained carefully neutral, but his hands clenched at his sides, betraying tension. I took a breath, gathering courage, and spoke the truth that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I'm staying, but on one condition. Hope flared in his eyes. Name it. You stop trying to control everything. I need some autonomy, some pieces of my life that are mine. I'll accept your protection, your attention, But I won't be a prisoner, Dante. If this is going to work, it has to be a partnership. Real partnership. Not just pretty words. For 3 heartbeats, he didn't move. Then he crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, pulling me against him with barely leashed desperation. His lips found mine. Fierce, possessive, a claiming that sent fire through my veins. When he finally pulled back, both of us breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "You're mine now, Eleanor, completely mine." "And you're mine," I countered, surprising myself with the boldness. That works both ways. A real smile crossed his face, transforming him from dangerous to devastating. Deal. The kiss that sealed our agreement held promise and peril, passion and protection. I'd chosen danger over safety, obsession over normal, and as Dante's arms tightened around me, I couldn't find it in myself to regret it. Outside the windows, Manhattan sprawled in all its complicated glory, millions of lives intersecting, millions of choices made. Mine had led me here, to this man, to this moment, and standing in his arms, feeling the fierce beat of his heart against mine, I finally felt seen, claimed, and terrifyingly, perfectly alive. The shadows I'd feared swallowing me had become home,